Please get a huge round of applause for Cynthia Matheny.
So thank you so much, Keely and Rich, for bringing me here today. It's an absolute honor to stand up here before you. So how many of you got into the real estate business in 2009? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. So 2009 is the year I got into real estate, and it was an amazing year to get into real estate because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just decided I was going to do what they told me to do, and everything was going to be okay. And for me, it seemed to turn out okay. I ended up being Rookie of the Year my first year. I was the top producer in my office my 5th year in real estate. And because I had such success, after only living in Charlotte for about 6 months, people started to ask me, "What's your secret?" And I thought, I don't really have a secret. But people ask me this time and time again, and so I decided to really sit down a minute and think about what was it that actually brought me the success that I had. And so I came up with a few different things. One is that God gave me the ability to connect with people on a level that I feel like it's a gift. He doesn't give it to everybody, but being able to connect with people is really important. So it may or may not be your gift, and it's not your gift. I'm going to share with you today how you can more effectively create powerful connections. So I found there are 3 simple steps to creating powerful connections. The first step is awareness. We're going to talk about self-awareness, and we're going to talk about awareness of the people that you are in relationship with. The second is perspective. I want to ask you to be open to the fact that there are more perspectives than just your perspective. And the third simple step is curiosity. We're going to learn how you can use the power of asking questions to live in curiosity to create greater connections. Now, there's a lot of talk right now as we're going through this shift about what should I do? Before you ask yourself that question, I want you to ask yourself a different question. The first question you can ask yourself is, who do I need to be? Because who you are, who you need to be, is the foundational step before you can shift-proof your business. So who do you need to be? We're going to talk about that today. So step 1, self-awareness. How many of you are familiar with the DISC concepts? Raise your hand. So many of you. Awesome. On your tables, hopefully there's one there for all of you. I have some information for you. Go ahead and pull that out. When Keely asked me to speak, I thought, okay, I need to be able to provide as much value as possible when I'm up there. So this is a takeaway for you. You can use this disc of information, the flip side of that. Keep that, put it by your phone, put it by your desk, and utilize what I'm going to share with you here today. So when we think about awareness, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a greater understanding of ourselves. I'm a quote girl. I love quotes. So let's dig into DISC. I'm going to give you a high-level overview and share with you as much as I can in this short period of time. I have several different courses that I teach, and most of them are 4 to 6 hour courses. So I took a little bit from each of my favorite courses to share with you here today. So when we think about DISC is a concept of how we are naturally wired. And the 4 different quadrants of behavior are dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. And if you'll notice, if you look on your card or you look up here, both the dominant style and the influence style both have in common that they tend to be more active and more direct. The influence and the steadiness styles both have in common that they tend to be more people-oriented and more open. The steadiness and the compliance styles have in common that they both tend to be more passive and more indirect. And the dominance and the compliance styles both have in common that they tend to be more task-oriented and more guarded. Now, we are naturally a combination of all 4 of these quadrants of behavior, all 4 of them, but in varying degrees. Now, it is typical for most people, not all, but for most people to more strongly identify with 2 of these 4 quadrants of behavior. So as I'm going through and talking about this, if you haven't taken a DISC assessment and if you don't already know how you are naturally wired, I just want you to be open to seeing where do you resonate? Which 2 of these 4 do you most identify with? So I have taken the liberty to nickname each of these 4 styles. The dominant style I've named the drivers, the I are the influencers, the S are the stabilizers, and the C are the analyzers. Now, there is no right or wrong style. There's no right or wrong combination. We need all 4 of these styles to function at a really high level. And the way you are naturally wired is going to make you really good at something. And it's going to make you really stink at other things. And so I don't ever want anybody to try to change who they are to accommodate someone. But what I want to ask you to do is become aware of how you're naturally wired. Ask yourself, how does the way I'm naturally wired move me towards my goals? And in other situations, how does the way I'm naturally wired hold me back from achieving my goals? So step 2 is perspective. So I want to dive in a little bit deeper into the 4 different styles. So the drivers, if you think about drivers, the D style drivers, they are more direct, they're more competitive. They tend to be fast paced. They tend to walk fast. They tend to talk fast, and they even tend to think fast. They don't need a lot of information before making a decision, so they are quick and decisive, and they get super impatient with other people, especially slower people. So the influencers, these are the people. These are the people who think strangers are just friends they haven't yet met. So they are talking with the person in line behind them with the grocery store, chatting it up with the cashier. They tend to be more optimistic. They tend to be more go with the flow, easygoing. They love people and they get their energy by interacting with other people. The S style, these are the steady, stable, supportive people. These are the sweet people who want nothing more than to make sure you have everything you need. Don't like the boat to be rocked, and they enjoy helping other people without receiving attention themselves. Now the analyzers, these are the compliant people. They tend to be more skeptical. They're not going to trust you until you've proven that you are trustworthy, whereas the I style will trust you simply because you are a human being, and they will trust you until you give them a reason not to. But our analyzers tend to be more quiet, more reserved. And sometimes the analyzers get a bad rap because people think, why don't you have a good personality? So in my world, I have a very special place in my heart for the analyzers because my youngest daughter, I'm a mom of 4 kids, and my youngest daughter is the only one that is wired the complete opposite of me. I know many of you, and you know that I have very strong D and very strong I tendencies. On the assessment, they come out 100%, 100%. And my youngest daughter, Kate, she is wired with a very strong C and a very strong F, which is the complete opposite of one another. And I'll share a story with you later about how impactful this can be when you understand the way you are naturally wired and you understand how the people you are in a relationship are naturally wired as well. Okay, perspective. I would like you to be open to understanding that there may be another perspective in any given situation. So when we think about perspective and the meaning that we assign any given thing, we see an object, we give it a meaning. We hear something that someone says, we give it a meaning. All of these meanings that we assign are based on our individual past experience. Now, nobody in this room, nobody in this world has the exact same past experience as anyone else. So if you think about it, your perspective, even if you're looking at the same thing, even if you're hearing the same thing, your perspective is likely not going to be the same. So I'm going to show you how this works after I read this quote. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not a truth. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Which of these 2 gentlemen is correct? The gentleman on the left or the gentleman on the right? They're both right, exactly. And yet they see things very differently. I've actually followed that, put my finger on my computer and gone, how the heck does this work? I don't know, but you can see it's a wonderful example about 2 people looking at the same thing see something extremely different. Okay, I love this one, and I need you to participate. So when I click to the next slide, I want you to tell me which way is he facing, and you say forward or to the side, okay?
Forward.
Which way is it?
To the side.
How many of you first, when you saw this, saw him facing forward? Raise your hand. The majority of the time, that's what it is. How many of you saw him facing to the side first? Okay, you guys are special. Which one of you are correct? You're both correct. And yet you saw different things because you have different perspectives. For some people, it could be where they're sitting in the room. For other people, they just see something different because we all have different perspectives. So let's do one more. When I click to the next slide, I want you to tell me what you see. Do you see a face or do you see a word? And I want you to shout it out loud. Ready? Face. Does anybody see a word? Okay, let me help you. For those of you who can't see it. So again, we see different things. So would it be fair to say that even when you think you are 100% correct at what you are looking at or what you are listening to, that there may be another perspective? Somebody may be thinking something different than what you are thinking. All right, step 3 is curiosity. When we think about curiosity, you can tell whether a man is clever by his answers. You can tell whether a man is wise by his questions. So in my course, The Art of Asking Powerful Questions, I teach people how to be more effective with the questions that they are asking. So I'm going to take you through a super mini version of my Art of Asking Powerful Questions. All questions are not created equal, and I was so happy to hear several of the speakers earlier talk about how you create your questions. So this is my power pyramid that I've created to help identify which questions are more and less powerful. The least powerful questions, and yet the most commonly asked questions, are closed-ended questions. So these are questions that can be answered with yes or no, or a very finite answer. When you ask a question that can be answered with yes or no, you're not getting very much information. How many of you love to hear the answer no? Raise your hand. Great. If you don't, somebody does, one person does. If you don't want no for an answer, don't ask a question that can be answered with the word no. I'm going to show you how to do that. So the next most powerful words you can begin a question with are where, when, which, and who. You'll get a little more information, but these are still very finite. Cynthia, where are you speaking? Speaking in Charlotte. But that doesn't really help you understand perspective. When are you going? On the 15th or the 17th. What is today? I don't remember. I've been here all week. So a little bit more information. So these are a little bit more powerful than closed-ended questions. The next question is a little more powerful because everybody's answer to the how question is going to be a little bit different. You and I might make the same peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but we're going to explain how we did that very differently. So asking someone how they do something can be a little more powerful, and you can learn a little bit more about them. But the two most powerful words to begin a question with are the words what and why. Only I don't want you to use one of these. I don't want you to begin any of your questions with the word why, and here's why. When you begin a question with the word why, it creates a defensive response in the person that you are talking to. So let me give you an example. Why are you opposed to joining EXP? Well, because, and then they're going to list all of their reasons. They feel like they have to defend their response. When you begin a question with the word what creates a feeling of curiosity versus a feeling of defensiveness. So any question that you ask that begins with the word why can be changed to begin with the word what. So let me give you an example. What is it that causes you to be opposed to hearing about EXP? Now, that causes someone to feel much more comfortable just sharing their reasons why versus defending their position. So moving forward, anytime you catch yourself asking a question that begins with the word why, I want you to remember that tall blonde standing up on stage saying, oh, that's right, I'm not supposed to use the word why. I'm supposed to change it to the word what, because every single question can be changed and phrased differently using the word what. So let's talk through a little bit more about the do's and don'ts of asking powerful questions. Here are the things that we want to do. We do want to engage with a mindset of curiosity. Now, humans as a general species, we tend to be very judgmental. And we judge people based on our own individual past and experience, and we judge people against ourselves. So I encourage you to live with a mindset of curiosity versus a mindset of judgment. Number 2, use clarifying questions to gain perspective. We'll talk more about this in just a minute. And third, listen with your mouth closed. especially for those high I influencers who tend to verbally process, think with their mouths, and interrupt people every time they make a connection with what the other person is saying. Listen with your mouth closed. What we don't want to do, we don't want to impose your solution or your advice immediately. Now, sometimes people might come to you and say, hey, I would really love your advice on this. Feel free. Naturally, if we have experienced something similar to what the person we're talking to is going through, we feel compelled to give them a solution or to offer advice based on what we have learned. Don't do that. Number two, do not make it all about you. And I'm gonna pick on the influencers because like I said, lead with my eye at 100%. Don't make it all about you. Let the other person participate in the conversation and don't hijack the conversation. And number three, don't make assumptions based on your reality or your perspective. What we want to do is we want to dig deeper. We want to ask more questions so we can truly understand what the other person is saying and what they are not saying. And we do that through the art of asking powerful questions. There are two types of questions. There are primary questions and then there are clarity questions. So primary questions are the first question that you ask. Now, the next question that you ask when you are being an effective listener and you are really striving to gain other people's perspective, the second question you ask can be found in the answer they've given to your primary question. The clarifying questions are questions that you ask to dig deeper. So we are going to practice today, not right now, but I want you to flip your little disc handout over to the other side that has my picture and my contact information. And there are some questions here. So I'm going to challenge you. For those of you who are drivers and influencers, I'm going to challenge you. For those of you who are more stabilizers and more analyzers, I'm going to encourage you to, on our next break or after the event today, there are some questions that I have typed out here for you. These are some primary questions that you can use to begin practicing asking powerful questions and gaining greater perspective and creating more powerful connections with the people who you've seen here today. So the first question I want you to ask, and you don't have to ask all four of the same person, you can pick one, you can ask all the different people one question, do it however you want. I wanted to provide you some specific questions that you can use so you can begin to practice what I'm sharing with you the minute you get out of your seat. So the first question is, what does this shift mean to you? Everybody's answer is going to be different. And then you listen to them, and then you're going to use one of the clarifying questions that I have also so conveniently printed for you on the little card. The next question, how do you think the shift will impact your business? What one word would you use to describe today's event? I love this one because it's really hard to only come up with one word. So some of you are probably already thinking, wow, I don't know, what one word would I use? Fourth question was, how has your perspective shifted? How has your perspective shifted today? So once you ask one of these primary questions, then use these clarifying questions to dig deeper. It will cause them to think. Anytime you ask someone a question and they don't have an immediate answer, sometimes our natural inclination is to rephrase the question or to give them an example of what we're looking for. And I encourage you, don't fill the silence. When you fill the silence after you've asked a question, what happens is you rob the other person the opportunity to actually think about how they want to respond. We get uncomfortable with that awkward silence, and I want to encourage you or challenge you, get comfortable with that awkward silence when asking other people questions. So questions like, tell me more about that. Now I realize this is not actually a question, it's actually a statement, but it is so incredibly powerful. If you say, tell me more about that, and then be quiet and just wait for them to tell you, what does that mean to them? Tell you more about that. Again, the second one is, what do you mean? Now, tone plays a very important role when asking powerful questions. So if you say this like, what do you mean? That's not coming from curiosity. But if you say, what do you mean? That is more of a tone of curiosity. So remember, we're going to live in curiosity while we're digging deeper and asking these questions. What does that look like? Or what does that look like for you? Don't assume that you understand what the other person means when they say something. If you do not ask questions and you make an assumption, you are basing their reality on your reality, and that just isn't accurate. So the more questions you ask and the deeper you dig, the more likely you will be to understand what it is they're thinking, what it is they're feeling, what is their perspective, or what is it that they aren't sharing with you. And the last one that I love is, what makes you say that? Again, another tone-inducing thing. What makes you say that? Doesn't come from curiosity, but what makes you say that? This is particularly effective if you're having a heated argument with someone, or someone comes to you and says, I'm really frustrated because you da-da-da-da-da. We naturally tend to get super defensive. But if you pause for just a moment and say, what causes you to say that? They may have read something completely wrong that is completely inaccurate from your perspective. So these are just a few examples. So I challenge you, or encourage you, to ask one or more of these questions to at least 5 people before you leave here today. Or maybe it's during happy hour, or maybe it's at dinner this evening, or maybe it's with your family when you go home. Because when I teach people, normally people attend my events because they want to learn how to grow their business and how to shift their mindset and their perspective. But what they end up walking away with is some valuable information that can really change your relationships at home as well. So everything that you've learned here can be implemented into your personal relationships as well as your business relationships. So the most powerful question, if you take nothing else away from my talk today, I want you to listen here and I want you to understand that. What is the most powerful question? So in order to determine the most powerful question, we first have to decide, what is the outcome we want to achieve? Now, so oftentimes we go into conversations and we don't really consciously slow down long enough to think, what is the outcome I want to achieve here? So we'll use real estate as an example. So when you're on a listing appointment or maybe a buyer consultation, obviously the outcome you want to achieve is you want them to work with you. You want them to sign the agreement. When you're having a conversation with an agent that maybe you've attracted and you would love to share more about EXP with them, you can say, or your outcome is, you would like them to say, yes, I'll sit down with you for a few minutes, or yes, I find joy. What would have to happen? And then you fill in the ideal outcome. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer and Seller, what would have to happen for you to choose me to be the agent to sell your home today? Mr. or Mrs. Potential Attracted Agent, what would have to happen for me to just get 15 minutes of your time and share some of the things that I've learned and that I think you would find valuable about EXP? When you ask that question, is there a no answer in there? There's not. So if you say, would you like to join EXP? No. But if you don't ask a question that cannot be answered with the word no, you will not get a no answer. And you will gain perspective from what's important to that person. Because what's important to me and what's important to you are likely two completely different things. So if you change the way you ask your questions, you can change your responses that you get. You can change the relationships that you have created. So the essence of pretty much what I teach anytime I am teaching this is about the golden rule. Now we all know the golden rule. We've learned it since we were little. It's treat others the way you want to be treated, right? I don't want you to practice the golden rule anymore. From the time you walk out these doors, I want you to start practicing the platinum rule. And the platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. Communicate with others the way they want to be communicated with. Present to others the way they want to be presented to. And attract others the way they want to be attracted by changing your perspective and changing the way you ask questions. So I want to close by sharing one of my most powerful connections in my life. So this is my youngest daughter. This is my sweet little Ellie Kate 8 years ago when she was 8 years old. Now, Ellie Kate is wired, like I mentioned, completely the opposite of me. She's the only one of my 4. And for the first 8 years of her life, I attempted to create a mini-me out of her. I would get super frustrated when she would hide behind my legs when people would come over, and I would pull her out and I would encourage her to have a conversation with them because it's rude not to have a conversation with people. She would go outside and play with her brother. They were only 18 months apart. And she would come back in within just a few minutes and she would want to snuggle up with me on the couch. Say, "Oh, Kate, what are you doing? You need to go back outside. Carson is outside. Go play outside. It's good for you to interact with the kids." And sometimes I would send her out and I would even lock the door so she couldn't get back in, because I felt it was important for her to go out and interact with as many people as I enjoy interacting with. So how many of you are familiar with Awana? Raise your hand. Okay, so several of you. So for those of you who are not familiar with Awana, Awana is a Bible-based program for kids where the kids go to a church group and they learn all about scripture. And they have a book and they do memory verses and they do all their memory verses and they get prizes and play games. And my kids absolutely loved going to Awana. So every Wednesday night when I lived in Charlotte, I don't live in Charlotte anymore, I moved to Boise 4 years ago, but every Wednesday night we would go to church. And I had a nanny that picked up the kids after school and helped them with their homework. And so Wednesday evenings I was rushing in the door and I was saying, "Okay, come on kids, it's time to go, get your shoes on." And my kids absolutely loved going to Awana. But one night I came home and sure enough, I was running behind and I was like, "Okay, get your shoes on, it's time to go." She didn't really move. I was like, "Hey, come on, we've got to go or we're going to be late." And she said, "Mom, I don't want to go to Awana tonight." I was like, "Get your shoes on, we're going. You love Awana, we're going to go, so hurry up." She said, "Mom, I really don't want to go tonight." And I was like, "Okay, to practice what I preach." "Okay, what is it about going to Awana tonight that causes you to not want to go?" And she said, "Finish my book." And I'm like, "Awesome, you finished your book, that's fantastic." "I don't want to go." "Okay. Okay, what is it about finishing your book that causes you to not want to go to Awana tonight?" Here's what she said. She said, "Mom, when you finish your book at the end of class, everybody lines up across from one another, and all of the kids who finish their book have to walk down the middle as they clap." And Mommy, I still get choked up. If I hadn't slowed down long enough, my fast-paced driver self, to really understand what was going on in my daughter's mind, I would have missed a huge opportunity, because it was at that point in time that I realized that something that would fuel me, that would give me energy, being in front of more people celebrating one of my accomplishments, is the very same thing that would cause her to feel absolutely filled with anxiety. She does not want to be recognized by other people, much less an entire group of people that are clapping for her, because that for her has the complete opposite response that it has for me. So from that point moving forward, I looked at my sweet youngest daughter, and thank goodness I started when she was 8 years old. I started looking at her and loving her and appreciating her for who she was, rather than who I wanted her to be. And my entire life since then, for the last 8 years, the way I parent Ellie Kate is different than I parent my other kids. The way I encourage her is different. And because of that, she has become one of my very best friends. And she would say to you, "My mom is my very best friend." So this is my sweet Ellie Kate today. And she is strong and she is powerful and she is quiet. And she doesn't like to be seen and she doesn't like to stand out. But she is absolutely amazing. So if you want to create powerful connections with other people, with your clients, with agents that you attract, and maybe even your own family members, I encourage you, go back to the basics. Understand how you are naturally wired. Understand how they are naturally wired. And with that, understand that you may have a different perspective. And that will give you the ability to live in curiosity, to ask better questions, and be able to extend grace to them instead of judgment if they are wired differently than you. Thank you.